All right, so the Serum 2 situation is crazy. The video title is no exaggeration, no lie. It was kind of left field where this came out of nowhere essentially and was a shadow drop that apparently was also a free update. Thanks, Steve Duda. The cool thing about this is that when we were expecting Serum 2 to come out, I don't think that our expectations were nearly as high as what was recently released. There's going to be a few things that I'm going to talk about. I will mention some new features in this video, but I do just kind of want to show you the new workflow approach aside from this new thing does this new thing does this. But what I also want to talk about is the burning questions of like, oh, does this replace phase plant? No. Oh, does this replace current? No. What makes them different? And kind of try to make a conglomerate of everything together and just kind of geek out over Serum 2. If any of that sounds interesting, I'd invite you to subscribe to the channel because we do things sound design here, and hopefully you'll learn something, have some fun, and just kind of enjoy the video. So with that being said, one of the few things that got me really excited about this, I'll just maybe cover 5, is that the first one that comes to my head is we now have a clip thing in here to where you can essentially create a song. This is going to be really stupid, but like just as a very quick demonstration, you know, if you key map everything or each oscillator out to different stuff. So let's say like this is your mid-range, this is your bass, and then this is your high range, and this is just a concept, okay? So please don't take this for what it is. You can essentially make a song in this. Just from being able to utilize that. And one really awesome thing about this in general is that this is a great sketch tool just as a means of like, oh, I don't really feel like going and designing drums and doing this and doing this. The factory content that it comes with as far as, you know, making drums usable or whatever is really fun. You can even create different parts. And I think that, I'm not sure, but is this in standalone? I would have to check, but if it is, that would be super awesome. I don't think that it is, but that would definitely be like a future wish list thing that would be really cool for Steve Duda to put out in the future. I've also been asking Kilohertz to create a standalone version so that way I don't have to open up a DAW. But I mean, imagine if you just have this and you're wanting to sketch out a very quick track, and then all you have to do is drag this out and pull this out here, and then you've got your MIDI. Some of you didn't know that, but yes, you absolutely can do that. Speaking of this, I guess entire ecosystem is very conducive to itself in its own way, kind of like how I give Faceplant a lot of praise, because you can actually resample kind of pseudo internally, so to speak. So let me explain. If I were to create a new patch, and let's say right here I've got a wavetable, doesn't matter. This one I have a sample. Something that you can do, in fact, instantly is play a note, come over to this, drag this out, and then drag it back into itself as a sample. And obviously they did that on purpose. That was such an incredible boss move on Steve if he developed this by himself on being able to do that, because that means if I have something that is even more crazy, maybe say something like this to where I've got a cool sound, and then I take that and I go, ah, that was cool, and then I pull this out and then come into this, make a new patch. Sorry, not about, but do something kind of like this. And then go into the files that I'm using for whatever that was of Serum. Well, now look, I have a sample to work with, and I can change this also, which is another boss move, in between all of these from multi-sample to granular to spectral. So I can audition this without having to reset the sample, where I don't think any other engine or any other synth engine is able to do something like that. And even if I change from this into a wavetable per se, but then I go back, it's still there. Now, if you save this patch and then you pull it back up, it won't let you do that. But I actually think that would be awesome if you can kind of do something where you're automating behind or in between, or having some kind of selector or so of the different sample or the different engines for the oscillators. But you have to realize that if you're making drums, this is super useful. If you're trying to come up with ambient stuff, which I'm going to show you here in just a second, that's super useful. If you're doing bass stuff, especially if you're like, oh, I've got a cool bass tone, right? Obviously it's turned way down because they normalize it or whatever, but let's say I've got a cool mix chain over this or whatever, which I don't have anything of myself um, saved yet, but you know, let's say I've got all my filters and blah 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 or whatever, I just pull it back up and get into this constant aspect of resampling that will continue to give me things that is kind of just like a factory, you know, if that makes sense. Add that on top of the other things that you can add to it with, you know, the constant quick routing, I think is the key word here of the new warp modes and all that other stuff. And you've got yourself a very fast access to getting sounds that we honestly haven't heard before. And speaking of sounds that we haven't heard before, the Spectral engine is something that is very good for specific sounds, and there's nothing else quite like it as accessible as this sans something like Harmor. But the fact that we have multiple engines now and a way to do all this cool FM and complicated routing and blah blah blah, it makes it that much more valuable. The cool thing for me, where I have found this to be most useful, are things like metallic sounds, leads. Anybody that loves tear out is going to love this synth. Odd Prophet just put up a really cool and very easy to follow video. I literally just recreated some of the stuff that he did, and I was like, okay, great, I understand this now. Um, yeah, very easy to do, but it still scales because we have essentially unlimited effects now, right? So, all in all, a lot of the workflow stuff that you have, whenever people were comparing things to Faceplant and Serum, they always said that Serum was like, you know, quote unquote, the faster workflow. I actually feel like with Serum 2, that is now a truth. I actually feel like this is a synth now that gives you fast access to things, whereas Faceplant is still the deeper thing. I'm going to hold off on the comparisons for now, but just to kind of give you an illusion to where I'm going with this towards the, I don't know, sometime later in the video. But for now, I also want to talk about some of the really cool things that you can do with creating ambiances or harmonies or something of the sort. So if I have some kind of chord progression in this, let's go ahead and reset this into like initial preset or whatever. Let me find a clip of mine, something that's just chords, and we'll find something in here that's supposed to be samples and clips. My library. I don't really know what this is, but let's just go ahead and drag this in here. I'm going to come into this, I'm going to go Control A and go Control C, and then I'm just going to open this up and paste this somewhere. As you can see, this works like a piano roll. So anything that you do inside of this piano roll is transparent inside of here, and they can work with each other back and forth. But now that we have something like that, there's a lot of really amazing features that really nothing else does this, except for maybe like one thing on iPad. Let me explain. The clip thing in here not only has a piano roll, but it also has some other crazy stuff, which are things like, sorry, I'm trying to scale this and make sure that this is going to work. Fugue machine or multiple clips. So if I take this and I copy this over here, we can do things kind of like this to where I could set the mode to be reverse, and then this is going to play back normally. You do need to make sure that this is in poly, so that way they'll both play together. But as opposed to just playing this one, you can see that's playing backwards. But now if I play this one, one playhead is going backwards, one's going forwards. You have these other modes that you can swap in between and start to play with, like I said, different harmonies and whatnot. And this becomes especially useful when you're trying to create clouds of harmony. If you were to do something that would be maybe just like a detune and then give this some kind of thing like this. You can even turn on the ARP. This has a bunch of stuff. It's very similar to Cthulhu, if you've ever messed with that, which, by the way, since I'm on that, if I wanted to, I could just change this to on, and what this will do is change this into MIDI through. So if we go to Serum 2, and I go and add an instance of Faceplant, thank God for Bitwig with not having to do crazy routing, but this is now going to send MIDI into this. So if you wanted to, you can essentially just use this again as its own sketch tool, even if you don't like this workflow, and make MIDI stuff with this as like a pseudo sequencer. Actually, it would be a sequencer. It's literally a pocket piano roll. Steve Duda, if you watch this video, one of my biggest requests is, could you make this for iPad? That'd be great. we really need this for iPod. That would be pretty cool. So yeah, some other cool things that you can do with this are breaking this. So if I play this now, and as you can see, you can create some really cool glitches and stuff. Back on the thing that I was doing from before, whenever I was playing the drums and the cheesy bass and the synth or whatever, you can kind of destroy the MIDI to where you're getting a crazy output. And if you have like an insane effect rack that's got like a bunch of delays, echo bode / frequency shifter, where is that? You know, different things like this to kind of just decimate the sound, then you're going to get a lot of really cool glitch textures without having to do too much. But in essence, I think that even just having access to a Fugue machine, the only other thing that I have like this, I'm trying to think, you can technically make one in the grid, but it's very complicated and it's not very precise. I guess you can also technically make one with the step sequencers or whatever, but it's not, you can't really control the phase, and that would be the one other thing that I would like with this. Like if you have control over the playhead and then you can select where that plays and just kind of remap it, that'd be pretty insane. That would be a great device for anybody if you haven't developed it yet. But sorry, back to what I was saying. The only other thing that's really like this is the Oxy 1 sequencer that I have, to which, no, it doesn't replace it, but it does make it really handy that I don't have to bust out a piece of hardware in order to be able to use something like this, right? And in that sense, I can also audition behind a lot of different versions of this, you know? So having just a quick access to these banks and whatnot means that I can play with octaves. I can play with all different kinds of, you know, versions, or create a two-part harmony, then a different two-part harmony, and essentially write out these chord progressions and figure out how this is going to sound while I'm constantly changing the sound without having to tweak into the other thing. This is literally, I would say that because, well, I don't know, maybe I won't say that, but it's very close to a DAW because of that, at least a groove box, right? Speaking of, you also have automation things. You have all these different options that you can draw note automation to, including MPE, macro mapping, MIDI CC, global stuff. Yeah, so, I mean, how cool is that? You can also set these other modes to these other things like random, static. You know, it would be cool with static if there was a phase thing on here, and you, again, you can kind of cycle through all that, but I'm not going to complain. Oh, and he was really looking out for us hip hop heads, because one major thing about this is that I don't have to complain about this. I can move stuff off grid. And that's like a really small but very important quality of life feature that I always look for in anything that is regarding sequencing stuff. Yay. All right, so now that you understand that, well, okay, that's kind of cool, but what if we did something to where this time I'm going to rely on rolling sampler, but I'm going to go back and play this clip again. Okay, great. That was cool. Now I'm going to put this into sample mode and turn this engine on, and then I'm going to drag this and put it in here. I actually didn't know I could do, yeah, I didn't know that I could go directly from here to here. That's really cool. If you're a sound designer and you make sample packs and stuff, you still want to drag this out, just so you know, because that way you actually got a copy of it, whereas if you put it somewhere else, you won't have a copy of it. But now that you have that, I mean, what was this in? We'll say D sharp 2. So, I mean, that would be the only consideration with this, but we can say, okay, instead of in C, this is in C sharp, D sharp. And now, let's go back and make this here. And we can mess with this as like a chord generator thing. Maybe. It's just very quiet. Or maybe I'm soloing something else. Ah, there we go. Sorry. And we can set this to a loop. Maybe you go back and forth. And then we can set this to the crossfade. We can kind of play around with this and put this in different spots or different places to, you know, get different. So if we were to add that to, oh, maybe that's why that's sounding a little bit weird. Yeah, okay, sorry, I forgot about the bode. But because of that, we can kind of maybe throw something on here like some reverb, maybe even some more convolution. And get into some really cool like ambient stuff just from resampling some of these pads and whatnot. I think that there's likely a way that we could change the starting position of this. Left position, LE. Okay, so maybe not. I am trying to see if maybe we can automate this or something, or maybe use some kind of macro on here. I haven't actually tested this, but you can. Interesting. So because of that, you can change the starting and automate the starting position with the macro. And so when we talk into getting into things that are just, you know, super ambient or whatever, then you can make lots of insane noise kind of like that, or just kind of start stacking delays and stuff. Crazy. Well, what happens if we set this and we change this into something like granular, right? So maybe we use the whole thing, we just play C, but we change the offset. You can add warp modes to this. Change the length, make it a little shorter. One thing that I do wish that this had is, as you can see, there are no like mute stuff. There are for the oscillators and stuff, but for some reason you can't turn all the effects off at once. You have to do it like this. And so that's kind of annoying. It's not the end of the world, but that would be really nice if we could utilize this to be able to just be like, I don't think that there's there's also no select all as far as I know. And so that kind of blows, but like I said, it's not the end of the world. Those mixing tools would be really nice. And then I guess maybe if I had to talk about some other criticisms I have, I think that these icons are way too big. And I don't need this stuff to be stretched out, but I feel like this is a missed opportunity to maybe split these lanes into two or something, and maybe make the general UI of the effect smaller to where it's a little bit easier to work with more multiple effects. They did think about this to some extent, because if you do this, then you can open up a little bit of extra space, but the scaling of this is just not... I don't like the Euro rack emulation thing or whatever. I guess if I had to complain, I also don't like that these splitters only show you one thing at a time. I get why he did it, but I just think that it's kind of an archaic design and it's not my favorite. Then again, I'm spoiled. You all know that I'm a phase plant person, so what can you say? But in any case, you know, let's say you do something like this and then you bounce this out to a C. Right, obviously that sounds ridiculous, but, you know, just as a means of... like, that was cool. So then you take that, throw it back in itself. Maybe move it back now. You can set this to, you know, a spectral thing now and just get all kinds of crazy shit. I love this. This is a kind of like a spectral filter slash... it's not technically a vocoder, but because it's resynthesizing stuff... oh, Bitwig just froze. That's great. But yeah, because you can resynthesize stuff by kind of shaping something here, you can kind of build your own harmonics that this will try to recreate via some kind of algorithm. And you just end up getting some wild shit. Which is pretty neat. Also, just as a forewarning, no, just let it be known. I'm sorry. This is the only thing that actually has the spectral option. So you have robotize, shift mirror, vocoding. I haven't actually gotten this to work with anything that is worth checking out, but I also have not gone through all of these. But just know that if you have a spectral thing, then that's cool. Someone else pointed this out, which is also really nice, just as a cool little tip. You can drag the oscillator to audio rate stuff, which is a pretty handy trick. I didn't find that out myself. That was something that someone else told me, but how convenient is that? Um, yeah. The last thing that I kind of want to touch on as a means of how I've been using this in cool and creative ways is regarding bass design. And so, one thing that I want to bring to your attention is another hidden feature that it's probably in the manual or maybe the advertisers or whatever. I've seen zero official advertising over this, so I don't know what's out there, but you can now create a custom vector filter. This means that you have 8 bands and you have 4 different corners to create 4 different snapshots of what this is supposed to look like. And because of that, you can, as you can see, create an insane format filter. It's pretty awesome. That being said, I have a couple of complaints with this. You can see that if I move this, you'll see that the resonance of this is being adjusted as opposed to this being dedicated gain. And that means that I can't make these slopes wider or thinner. That kind of blows. I don't expect, a spectral filter table thing from extra records, but something that I still would like to see is a dedicated parametric EQ as opposed to just this one, which is fine. And if I were to really break this down between the filters and stuff, you absolutely can make your own filters and all that. I just really like having a quick access to being able to do something like this with more than 8 bands at that. I don't know, hell, even let's bring up ProQ 4 and just be like, boom, 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 adjust it kind of like this. Not for EQ purposes. This is purely for filter purposes. Create a val kind of like so, and then grab the overall thing of this and adjust the scaling wherever that is. There we go. So making a val like this is extremely fast and helpful, especially for my kind of bass design and stuff. And you can kind of do that in some cases with this, but it's not quite as accessible. And I guess since we're talking about this, the one redeeming factor about this, though, is that you can actually use the PZSVF filter as an effect here as well. So, I definitely have to give it credit. I still would like more than 8 bands. I want it to just be, a parametric EQ with, I don't know, let's say 24 bands or something to create a custom comb filter or to create these valve filters and whatnot. That's just me though, and that's me being me because, I always have to complain about something, right? Yes. So that being said, that kind of wraps up some of the coolest things that I find useful about Serum, but I do want to talk about this relationship with all the other things. It's kind of funny because, people started making these offspring of Serum, and then Serum made an offspring of itself, and then now everybody's like, oh, what's the best synth? What is this? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. And first of all, stop asking yourself that question. That's a very beginner question. And that would be the only time that I would say, like, that's when you should start thinking about what you want to do. If you can only afford one synth, if you can only afford one thing. And I would say, let's say you don't have any of these, right? And by any of these, I mean, let's say you don't have faceplant. Let's say, and I've said this on another video that is probably going to go up before this, but let's say you don't have current. Let's say you don't have Serum 2 or Serum 1, doesn't really matter. And then let's say you don't have Vital. These are kind of the giants right now, standing on leading third-party synthesizers. And as you can see, they're all very similar in a lot of ways. I'm not ready to go into a full comparison between all of these, but I will just kind of say that the main synopsis of all of these is that even though they look very similar, they all kind of do at least a few features or a handful of features that differentiate themselves from other synths, including, this to this to this, right? This has some cool stuff that that it can do with the, what's it called? Where is it? with the unison and all that, I would say that actually I haven't done a direct comparison, but this might have been cannibalized by this. It has a lot of unique stuff compared to Serum 1 for sure, but I guess that's kind of obsolete. But between these two, for one, Serum doesn't have an audio follower. Likewise, in a really odd decision, which I've criticized Current for, or minimal audio for this, is that this actually doesn't have a wavetable maker. It's like, what? Huh? But what it does have is a really cool harmonic slash additive engine that is great for making drums and stuff. I've made some really killer kicks and snares in this, and I'm really excited to do some drum stuff in here probably tomorrow on stream, which, by the way, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and Saturdays, mid-afternoon PST. That's when I generally do this kind of stuff. But yeah, you'll notice that like there's these small nuances, but is it enough to make a big difference? Is it enough to buy all of them? Maybe for a content creator like me, because I have, content banks for Faceplant, for Current, for Vital, and then now, I don't know, if y'all want me to do a pack within Serum, I would love to know. I don't want to waste my time, but if there's enough interest, then maybe I'll do something like that. So let me know in the comments what you think. One really cool thing about Current is that this thing, overall clipping, like that's such a G move, So, but it's like all small. The thing is like, if you know one, you pretty much know them all, minus, some very specific approaches or very specific things. And my best advice for you to how to decide between all this stuff is to demo it. I very quickly want to answer the question, does Serum 2 make everything else obsolete? And I would say absolutely not. Is it a very refreshing synth that I'm personally excited to, spend some time with? Yeah, because I've been looking at this fucking thing for 5 years and counting. Like, look, I'm not saying that I'm an amazing sound designer or whatever, but look, I've put the time in. I have put the time in within this, and I love it. It is my favorite, is my bread and butter. There's so many things that this thing can do, and for me, the speed and the efficiency of how fast I can build something with this, and the fact that it's limitless is definitely, something to be said. But this is new and it's shining. And I paid a bunch of money 10 years ago, way back in 2014, in order to get the version 1. And for somebody to have a really strong act of kindness and also confidence that this is a great product for people that don't have this, you know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, I want to spend some time with this. I want to see what this can do. And I also can appreciate this for the things that it can do that's unique for itself, as opposed to, can I make this do faceplant? And I think that's kind of what everybody's looking for, is like the all-encompassing, all-in-one or whatever. I guess an honorable mention or dishonorable mention would be Arturia Pigments, but you all know that that's not really my favorite synth in the world. Not that it's bad, I just don't like it. I don't prefer it, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, these days you can't really go wrong with sound design. There are, I guess I'll also say that too, is like, in my opinion, for the most part, it's only people like you and I, and I'm assuming that most people that are watching this video are my subscribers, that are really into the, deep sound design craziness. But, if you're going to make a Reese, like, it's 2 oscillators, a distortion maybe, and a filter. And it's like every single subtractive synth to some extent can do this. You know what I'm saying? And this is what most people do with their sound design. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't need the latest and greatest and craziest. If you buy a new synthesizer, that does not mean that you're going to make better music. So don't buy anything. Don't invest in stuff. Don't get into the hype unless if you really know that this is going to be something that you can already use. If you're going to take the plunge in getting into sound design, the first thing that I would say don't do is buy something. Learn your effects. I say that all the time. The best sound design tools are the effects. Straight up. There's a couple of unique situations. Spectral synthesis, 100%. That's something that is not very popular. It's something that's not very accessible. But keep in mind that that's one very specific kind of sound. But 9 times out of 10, if we talk about wavetable, we talk about FM, we talk about all these things, they've been around for, I don't even know how long wavetable synthesis has been around, but all the other things, at least 50, 60 years. And you can for sure get your hands on something like that. But high quality effects, things that have really dense modulation, you want to invest in those because those are the things that you can apply to any sound, any sample, any generator. Those are the things that are going to help you build a sound profile that is your character, you know? That's just my personal opinion. Synths and stuff are great. And if you're like, yo, Serum, ride or die, Serum, best synth, whatever, I don't really give a shit. You know, for me, it's about the music. If you're just someone that's a straight up sound designer or whatever, that's a different conversation. But at the end of the day, it's about the music to me. And that's something that I think separates myself from other channels. No shade towards anybody else, but it's not about, you know, the trending synth. It's about, does this suit me? And can I make something that I'm happy with? And do I enjoy, you know, starting from scratch and coming up with something that is refreshing and inspiring? I'd also say don't buy a synthesizer just for presets. Or if you do that, probably go for like Complete, go for Omnisphere, something like that. I don't know. When I first started making music 10 years ago, I bought Silent One because I heard that Seven Lions use it. And then I went through the presets and shit thinking that, oh, he just uses the sounds that are baked in. And I was like, no, there was maybe one that I recognized. I was like, oh, there it is. But you know what I mean? I was disappointed because I kind of had this weird expectation for myself that I was going to be able to just immediately jump into making music like him. And that guy's songwriting is on a whole different level. Sorry, tangent. Cool. So, all in all, no, this does not kill anything. It doesn't replace anything. I think that, you know, one of the biggest differences of, you know, all of this stuff, especially for this, is that this is a free upgrade. This is still free. You know what I'm saying? One unique thing that this does have is text to speech. I think that might be a paid feature. I don't remember, but wait, I don't even remember how to do that. But text to speech is something that, no, oh, maybe so. Okay. Resynthesize preset to wavetable. Yeah. So text to speech might be a paid add-on, but that's still something that I've never seen in any other synth, you know. It's kind of funny. It's kind of a gimmick, but it's something. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this presentation on this new synth. I also hope that, you know, if you're somebody that bought Serum in the last decade or so, or are planning on getting it, that you really enjoy it. I'm curious, would you like to see me do more videos on Serum 2? You probably know that they're going to be about Neurobase or things that you have already seen me do on the channel because there's only so many things that I can cover, but I can't really think of a lot of things that I would make videos about in this that you couldn't already do in another video that I've already covered, but I don't know, I'd be happy to revisit it, I guess. Let me know your thoughts. So thanks everybody, I appreciate it, and have a great rest of your evening. Subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll catch you on stream. Oh, and one final thing, if you want to support me, Alckemy.com. I've got presets, samples. You can book a lesson with me there. You can join the Discord. It is in the link tree of the description. You can consider becoming a member if you want access to my courses, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, leaving a comment, liking a video doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time, and I really appreciate those too. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.